Good morning, everyone. Welcome. Let me know where you are dialing in from or watching from. I'd love to know. This is Burnout Isn't the Price of Success for lawyers navigating career and motherhood. And as I've said before, if you've seen my posts on this, if you saw even the invitation, if you read through that, you know, or if you're watching live, you were scrolling LinkedIn and you just found this video live and you're seeing me live right now. This is not just for women lawyers who are navigating career and motherhood. It's also for parents and allies, anyone who has been working really hard for a very long time at a very high level of intensity. And then you may be hitting a point where you're wondering, what is all of this for? What am I working so hard for? Why does this feel different than it did before? Before it may have felt really exciting and motivating, and you were so eager to succeed and to succeed. We know there are different definitions of success. Very eager to succeed and even just do well where you were at, right? As a lawyer, if it was in-house, at a firm, wherever you were, government, wanting to do really, really well. And you did that and you worked really hard, and you also had years of experience before that, law school, college, and or maybe you worked before you went to law school, which many of you do. And then you hit this point in your career where things shift. You become a parent, especially if you become a parent, your priorities can shift and your perspective can shift. And what you want can shift. And how you want to work can shift. And how you want to live your life can change. And this is what this talk is about today. It's about how do I respond in that moment where things are getting overwhelming for me? Things are getting very stressful for me. I'm constantly fatigued. I'm starting to question why I'm doing this thing the way I'm doing this thing and why this thing is the way that it is. Okay. So this talk really is about what is burnout? What is it not? Because I hear a lot of people use the word burnout, but I don't think we fully appreciate what the word really means. It is not, I'm tired, I'm stressed. Burnout is so much more, it's so much deeper than that. And it's so much more painful than that. So I'll talk about a little bit about what burnout is, what it is not, why so many women lawyers, and you can say high performing professionals, right? In these really fast paced environments, why so many miss it in themselves. I mean, I'm not immune to that. I miss it in myself as well. Yes, as someone who teaches this, I did as well. And we're going to talk about three different things you can do to start preventing it. What can you do a little differently so that you're not burning yourself out after all these years of intensity and working so hard? How do you shift so you don't keep going at the same pace? Because the reality is that when you are a parent, again, I'm focusing on mothers here, when you are a parent, you cannot work the way you did before. You cannot. Things have to shift a bit. It's a juggling act. I don't believe in work-life balance. I think that is a myth. I think it is great if unicorns existed. I love horses, would love a unicorn. However, they're not real. And we have to stop believing in these myths that work-life balance exists. There is no perfect balance. Every day is a rearrangement of your responsibilities, of the tasks before you, of your obligations, and the things that you want to do. And so we have to be honest about that, because when we become a parent, things have shifted, whether you accept that or not. And my goal is that you start to accept that and that we make some changes that really fit with your life and what your life is like now. So I want to make sure that we're on the same page, that you're entering this with an open mind. As always, if you've attended any of my lives, you know that the number one requirement is you enter with an open mind. If you are entering this session with me and you're thinking, oh, there's nothing I can do about my burnout. It's just the environment. Law firms are just like that. This biotech I work for is just like that. I'm going to say one thing, and you know this if you follow me, if you follow my content and you've heard me speak before. We have to think of burnout, work-related stress, all of this on parallel tracks. There is a system, there is an environment. There's a culture that is a certain way. In law firms, the billable hour is king. We know that. I've talked about that. I've talked about people needing to accept that that is what is happening. Like that is the reality right now. Okay. And then you have your individual agency. You have things that you may be able to adjust that are within your control. You cannot control your environment or control people or their behavior, right? And you cannot single-handedly change a system or environment. You cannot do that. However, you have agency. And so change, like for people to stop experiencing burnout, we have to have both tracks running in the same direction, right? You need systematic, structural, organizational change, and you need to change individual agency. And my job is to help you exercise the agency you already have that you may not be aware of. So let's get into it. Here's what I want to share about my own experience with burnout, because I alluded to it before, but the truth is that I teach and I coach on how to prevent burnout. And I myself, even in the midst of that, started to miss the signs of my own burnout. Now, this happened for me. Again, we're focusing on motherhood here, right? It happened for me after my third child was born, maybe 8 months after, 6 months after. And I had been under extreme level of stress in pretty much every area of my life. And I started to have these symptoms where I couldn't feel rested. So I would sleep, but I never felt recovered. I would take a few days off, never felt recovered. And I just had a deep sense of fatigue. Like my body was, it was like dragging all the time. I started to also have panic attacks randomly. They were not triggered by anything. I just would have these panic attacks that would come and I would lose my breath. And I couldn't, it's like I couldn't catch my breath. And that was starting to happen more frequently. I started to experience hair loss and skin rashes. And I mean, I was starting to experience all these physical symptoms and nervous system symptoms. And then I started to really get detached and feel disconnected from a lot of things. People in my life, like friends, family, even my kids, like starting to feel very detached and like I didn't care as much anymore, because I was so fatigued. And I also experienced, people call it, brain fog. But for me, what it was I would try to work on something for work, something that should take me a few hours. And I would be up till like 3 in the morning, like doing the same thing over and over and over. Like I could not get myself out of my own loop, my own thought loop in my head. And it was never good enough. And it wasn't right. And it was because I was stuck though. Like I couldn't actually, my brain was not functioning the way that it used to. I would be talking in meetings or even just, with people, and I would lose my thought mid-sentence consistently. Sometimes you lose your thought mid-sentence and you say, "Oh, what was I going to say?" That's not what I mean. I mean a more consistent losing your thought, losing your sentence, not knowing what you just talked about. And I would have to go back to people after and say, "Did I make sense? Because I don't think I made sense and I lost kind of what I wanted to say." And people would say, "No, you were fine. You were fine." But me, I'm like, I don't know if I was, if people could understand me. And so I started to realize I started becoming like dysfunctional. Like I could not operate at the level I did. And then I was having all these physical symptoms and I was dragging and I was just feeling very not like myself. And, you know, it took me a very long time to get support, months, because I'm sure, like many of you, when you go through a hard time, you're thinking to yourself, I can handle it. Like, come on, like I've been through some stuff. Like I can work through this. I can push through. This is just temporary. Just like, let me get to this month, or let me get to the next week, or let me get to this time of the year and I'll be okay. And I'll be able to really rest and really figure this out. And, that never happened for me, because when I took like a week off, it was just more of the same. And so I had all of these different symptoms. I realized I needed support. And so I got that. And it took me months and months to recover. But I ended up really having burnout and depression and anxiety. And my depression was very severe. You don't always have depression and anxiety with burnout, but they often are linked. Because you can imagine some of the symptoms of depression are similar to the symptoms with burnout. And my point there of sharing that is to share that even someone like me and people that you know who try to help you with, hey, here's what you can do to better manage things so that you feel less overwhelmed. We too are susceptible to missing signs of burnout and missing the things that would prevent us from going so far into burnout. Because there are those symptoms that I had where I was, especially when I was feeling fatigued and started to feel detached, that I wasn't paying attention enough, and I should have paid attention a little bit more and got support earlier. And so if you take anything away from this talk, because I don't want anyone to go through what I went through, because it was very dark time in my life, probably the darkest time I've ever been through. I don't want you to go through that. I want you to have some of the tools that will help you move through that better than I did, and better than I've seen people move through it. So that is what I want you to take away from this. I'm going to tell you what burnout is, what it isn't. I'll give you things that you can do. But I really want you to hear this talk and really think about how it might apply to you and what you could do differently starting today, not tomorrow, today. Okay. Let's talk about burnout. Here are the three core elements of burnout. All right. Like I said, it's not I'm busy. I'm just tired. It's a busy season. Ugh. It's not just that. It is more prolonged. So burnout is what happens when you are exposed to chronic, that's long term, right? Chronic ongoing stress at work for far too long without enough recovery, where the stress is not resolved. There is no release. Okay, so it shows up as these three elements: exhaustion, detachment, and a reduced sense of efficacy. So for exhaustion, right, I shared that, a week off wasn't enough for me, even a weekend. Like I just felt very depleted. And you feel it, you just feel so incredibly drained. And you feel like resting one day, a week or two, doesn't really help you because your body is so exhausted and depleted. And then it shows up as detachment, right? Where I shared that, I started to feel disconnected from people, and you start to not care. There's cynicism there. You start to not care. You start to get emails and be like, don't care, moving on. And that is not like you. That's what's important to recognize, is the response you have of I don't care is so opposite of how you operate, that that's your signal that, like, why do I not care anymore? Like, what is going on with that? And exploring that and asking yourself some questions about, why do you now not care when you did care so much before? Right. So that's that second piece of burnout, which is you're going through the motions. You start not to care as much. You start to feel detached. And then that third element is this doubting yourself, or this decreased sense of your own efficacy, right? Feeling like you're not doing enough, you're not doing a good enough job, you're not performing, even if externally it still looks like you're doing really well. Sometimes that won't always be the case. But the key is how you feel inside. Like the key is that you feel like nothing is enough. This is not good enough. I don't know if I'm doing this right anymore. Where you once knew you were doing pretty damn well. Okay. Now, most people experience one or two of these elements and they keep going because they're still functioning at a very high level, right? Even when I was exhausted, I'm still functioning at a high level. And I've seen it in my clients who come to me, and they come and they say, I can't do this way anymore. I'm done with this. And they're so tired. They don't feel detachment yet, though. And they don't feel a reduced sense of efficacy yet, but they feel exhaustion. And that's where I can catch them and say, okay, we can work with this, right? And so you want to make sure that you understand you don't have to experience all three elements. One is enough. And sometimes you miss it, though, because you're still operating at a very high level at work, which is what you do, right? Like you work through pain, you work through fatigue, you work through, you have a headache, you work through sickness. I will never forget when I had food poisoning, I traveled, this is years ago. I had food poisoning when I traveled for work, and I was doing an investigation, and I had to interview a witness, and I had to do it that next morning. Like, I mean, this is why I was traveling, and I was so sick. But, you have to show up, and you have to do what you got to do. Take your medicine, grab your toast, drink your water, your Gatorade, whatever it is, your Pedialyte. Do you know that Pedialyte is also for adults? I didn't know that either, but it is true. And you get back to work. You push through. And by the way, no one noticed. I remember going back to the office like a few days later, and people were telling me, I heard you had food poisoning. I made you like a warrior. And I'm thinking to myself, yeah. Years later, I look back on that and I was like, that was crazy. Yeah, I've pushed through food poisoning. You've pushed through all these physical ailments. Even when you're sick, you got a cold, you got a headache, you have a stomach bug, you're working because you're like, I have to bill my time. And if I don't do it now, I have to do it later. And I don't have time later. Right? So we're used to pushing through no matter what. It is an element of how you've been able to get this far. Like, I just don't want to, I cannot diminish that. People who push through and sacrifice, they understand that that is how you can get ahead. I mean, it is true in many aspects. The rub is where you start to sacrifice yourself, right? That's where you've crossed a line. And sometimes we don't pick up on that right away, but that is where it turns from an asset to your Achilles heel, right? Pushing through, helpful, until it becomes unhelpful to you and you start sacrificing yourself, and you're doing it at the expense of yourself, right? So how many of you have told yourself, if you're going through a rough period, but you've told yourself, I'm just stressed. There's a lot going on right now. I'm just tired. I'm drowning, but I just got to get to the weekend, or I just got to get to the next week, or I just got to get to Q2, right? I just got to get to Q2 or Q3. How many of you have said that to yourselves? And if you have, my question is, how many times have you said that to yourself in 1 year? So we are in April. So we're at the beginning of Q2 right now, second quarter. How many times have you said, I'm just tired. Let's get to the next week, next month. How many times have you said that to yourself since January? And if you said it to yourself often enough, where you're telling yourself right now, I've said it to myself a lot, I would then ask you, did you repeat that last year often? And if you have, you're now in a long-term stress response. And I need you to now pay attention. Okay? Because you can only do that for so long. And you may have seen this, but it is true that when you ignore your body and you ignore what is happening, there will come a point. This is just factually, this is based on research. There comes a point when your body says, that's enough. You're not listening to me. And now I'm going to force you to listen by shutting you down. That is literally what happened to me. That is what happens to people, is the body starts saying, I'm tired. A week or two, that's not enough for me. That's not enough for me, IDV. I need more. I need you to pay attention. When you ignore that, then it starts affecting you mentally and emotionally. Now I'm going to detach because I'm trying to preserve and protect myself, right? The body is trying to protect itself by detaching so that you pay attention to it and you care for it. When we ignore those things, the body will shut it down and make the decision for us. And you don't want to be in that position, because when you get into that position, you now can do nothing for anyone else. So all that pushing through to be there for your family and your kids, and to be there for your boss, and to be there for all these partners and people that are your clients, all of that, you know what you get? You get to do zero, none of it, because you haven't paid attention to what your body was telling you, right? I'm not saying it's your fault. I'm saying pay attention. So when you are close to that, you can catch it and be like, no, 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 I know something's going on. I'm going to back it up. I'm going to take care of myself so that I don't get to 0% and have nothing to give. Okay. Like I said, burnout is not, I'm just tired, I'm stressed. It is also not, when you recognize you have burnout, it is not a weakness. It's not that you are ungrateful for all of the privileges that you enjoy. So this is important, because one of the number one things that my clients will tell me when they're feeling this way is they'll say, I feel like people will think I can't handle it. People will think I'm weak. And by the way, they themselves also might mistakenly believe that they're weak too, right? That why can't I handle this? Why can't I push through this? Why am I not strong enough to bear this? Why? And then, oh, I should be so grateful because people would do anything to be in my position and to be a lawyer and to work at this firm and to work at this company and to have a family and to be a mom. Like people start comparing themselves to what someone else would want and how they would feel about their own work life situation, and they start to take responsibility for that, for other people, what they perceive as other people's feelings, and say, I should be so grateful to be in this position. What do I have to complain about? And then also thinking about world problems. They're like, I have nothing to complain about. I'm fine. Everything is fine, even though inside they're dying, suffocating, right? Slowly. Okay. And then burnout is not a sense of failure. I struggle the most with that right there. And I see a lot of my clients struggle with that as well, right? Where you feel like if you admit to yourself that the way that you've been doing things ain't working anymore, it's not working for you anymore. And to admit that you have reached a limit, you have reached your capacity. Your body has said no more. To admit that you can't push through that wall. It's a brick wall. You can't push through that. You can't push through that. To admit that feels like you have failed. Because especially for me, I'm first generation lawyer, first generation born in this country. And I will tell you that when I think about the sacrifices my parents have made, I think about them, their sacrifices, everything that they've been through. I remember thinking about my life at that time and being like, oh my gosh, this is such a failure. Like every opportunity they fought to give me, I have. And look, I have failed. Like I can't even do this. I can't even push through this right now. Right. So for me, it also was a failure. Just as I felt like a failure as a person, as a mother, as a professional, like all of those things. That was very difficult. And that was one of the biggest barriers I had to getting help, because it wasn't just admitting it to myself. It was, what does that mean? And how do I work through that with someone else, which is very vulnerable and can be difficult to do. So burnout often happens, though. This is what is happening to us when we are capable, we are reliable, we are working very, very, very hard. And it's hard to step back from that and say, well, what do I need? Because this isn't working for me anymore. And you miss it because you are pushing through and you have a high tolerance for stress. There is an incredibly high tolerance for dealing with pressure and stress in these kinds of environments, right? And not only stress and pressure dealing with your professional environment and the demands on your time and your energy, but also the stress level you experience as a parent, right? I mean, I get very overstimulated when my three children, who are younger, but still, they're old enough to not have to need me 24/7, right? But I get overstimulated and stressed when it's mommy, mommy, mommy a gajillion times in 1 hour. That happens, right? I get stressed when I have to manage all of their things. I have to manage their activities, or I have to, make sure everyone is okay each day for like after school, right? You have a lot to manage as a parent, and a lot of stress as a parent. And that can include financial stress, right? There's so many different layers to it. But it's not just stress at work, it's also stress of managing your home and your family. And especially if you have children who have different needs, that's another added layer. If you're taking care of your own parents, another added layer, right? So it's everything comes at once. It's everything happening at the same time. And so instead of, stopping what you're doing and saying, no, I'm not doing this, I'm not doing that, I'm not doing that, because some of us can't afford to do that. I can't just say I'm not going to take care of my children. That's not an option for me, right? So you adapt. You adapt to the higher level of stress. This is very well known in psychological research. You adapt to a new baseline. They call it it's a baseline adaptation, where you have this baseline of stress. Something happens, like you become a parent, you go back to work, and then your baseline of stress adjusts so it's a little higher. And then you're accelerating your career as you're having children. So it's a double acceleration of children, acceleration of career, and then your stress increases and you meet that moment and you adjust to that stress level. And so your baseline is constantly increasing until, again, there's a limit that you hit because no one can do everything, right? So here are some early signs that you might be missing. If you feel like, I'm not sure I see myself completely in the three elements I shared with you of burnout, maybe here are some early signs where you could consider, are you experiencing them? And this may be something you don't want to dismiss. So the Sunday dread. This alone is not it. You have to think about this sign with some other ones because many people have Sunday dread and are not burned out whatsoever and are not going to be. But there's this sense of, oh, I don't want to get to Monday because I have to go back to work. I have to go do this thing. I don't want to do this thing. That could be just you're unhappy in your role. That could be that your role is not challenging enough for you. So there are a lot of reasons for that, but this is one thing to look at. Do I feel a sense of Sunday dread? Is it every Sunday? Am I ever excited about work? Ever? Especially on a Sunday? Because sometimes I often am, right? I'm excited about what I do. That wasn't always the case back then, right? Like some weeks I was like, oh yes, I want to get to Monday. And some weeks I was like, nope, I have no interest in the Monday. Right. So just pay attention to what you are consistently experiencing. Here is where you want to really pay attention. Are you still tired when you take time off? So when people tell me I was burnt out, I took 2 weeks off, I say, okay, I don't think that's burnout though. I think you were just tired and you needed some time. Burnout is when you take 2 weeks and it's not enough. You take 2 weeks and you're still really tired. You take 2 weeks and you still feel like this heaviness. And if you know what I'm talking about, you know how that feels in your body where you still feel really heavy and depleted. And you feel like nothing has really shifted. Like you don't really feel rested or recovered or restored. You need to really pay attention at that point. And pay very much attention when you are experiencing any kind of emotional flatness, like you feel neutral, or meaning you don't feel like high or low or optimistic or you just feel like flat, like neutral, or you feel nothing. You feel numb or disconnected from things and people that used to really matter to you. And then you have irritability. This is where you want to be looking for, do I have a short fuse with people and with situations? And this is something that people can get irritable and they can get annoyed and they can get frustrated, right? But you're paying attention to situations and people that it didn't annoy you before, but now it all of a sudden does. And it's consistent. It's like now I feel like I'm irritable often with things and people that I didn't experience that with previously. So these are just some, not all, early signs to be thinking about. Are you experiencing these? And if you are experiencing, especially still tired after time off, and you're experiencing emotional flatness, this is where you need to go to those three elements and ask yourself, am I experiencing these? And if you are, this is where you need to really be mindful of what you do next, because you cannot keep going the way you're going, because this is where it's just going to continue to go downhill. We talk about acceleration. This is where we decline. And we don't want our body to stop us. We want to catch it before our body says enough. Because here's what you're doing. You have a very high performance role, high achieving, you're working really hard, you're working at a very fast pace, high pressure, productivity, outcome, output driven, need to be on all the time, oftentimes. Even when you're in-house, depending on your level, right? This is going to be true for you. And then, as a mother, and you're trying to live a life, a human life. You're not a robot. You're trying to live a human life, and you're trying to be present with your children. You're trying to be present with the people that you love. You're trying to be there. If you're there, you're trying to be there and not be thinking about all the things you have to do for the house or for the home or for work, right? You're trying to be emotionally available, right? A lot of us I feel like every generation of parents tries to shift the way they parent based on how they were parented. And the generations coming through are no different, right? Like maybe you are doing something, you're parenting in a different way than your parents parented you, which takes an incredible amount of intention and work because you're trying to be intentional with almost every interaction and not be reactive. That takes a lot of energy. And you managing a household, managing your home life, managing kids, managing what they have going on, making sure they're okay, that they're healthy, that you're healthy. All of these things take up an incredible amount, again, of energy and effort. Both require a lot of capacity at the same time. But what happens is because we're so used to accelerating and working hard and pushing through and doing the things and just going, we just try to, you know, do better at both. We just try harder at both things. We don't let anything give. We just push as a mother, as being like a full human, as a, high performing professional and lawyer. We just try to do all of it. We're like, let's just go. We're just going to keep going. And this is where we have to recognize that there's a shift. Because when you're in a very high pressure environment, which lawyers are, and even if you're a professional in an environment that is fast paced, similar to what you would experience as a lawyer in a law firm, or, if you're in house, is that you're operating inside of a workplace that has systems and expectations that were not designed for the reality of caregiving and working outside the home, right? So you have to make sure that you are aware that what you are trying to achieve, it's actually not what the system was designed to give you, right? Now, you have to remember that there is a cost to all of this, right? Like you are trying to add more effort, more energy, again, to a system that like is not meant for that. The system was designed for women to stay home and men to work. And Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who's one of the greatest Supreme Court justices of our time, she graduated from law school, I believe number one in her class, and she went to a law firm to work. And he was like, "You're a woman, like you can't work here. Can't do it." Because all the people that were at that firm were men and they can't have children, right? They are working and their wives were home having children and raising children. That's how that system started. That was the structure, right? It wasn't that there was someone who was working at the firm who also had children, who had to caregive for those children, and was responsible for that in addition to their full workload. That wasn't the system that was designed. Okay, the system designed, it was separate. Those two roles were separated. And now as women lawyers, we're trying to do them at the same time. But the system hasn't changed that much. It hasn't changed that much. It's changed, of course, a bit. But it hasn't changed that much in terms of what the expectations are of you as a worker, right? It hasn't changed that much if we're really honest about that. And so what happens is then, like I said earlier in our time together, what we have to do is we have to take some agency and control over what we can take control over, because the system has not budged as much as we would like it to, right? And so how do you prevent burnout? What are the things you can actually do? In addition to what I've been sharing all along, right? It doesn't start with color coding your calendar and responding to emails that says no. I get that, I get how people say no is a complete sentence. In certain situations, that is true. I don't think that's true at work. For work matters. For work matters, okay? For work projects, cases, I don't think that's the response you want to give when you're asked to do something for work, is you're going to say no and then think to yourself, yeah, that's a fine response. It is not a fine response. It is an unprofessional response. Unprofessional. We don't want to do that, right? You can say it in your head, you can think it, but you don't want to demonstrate that or show that in your interactions, right? So we're not talking about productivity hacks. there are so many more steps that you need to get to before you start implementing these little things that may help you on your day to day, right? You really prevent burnout, or you can ease off of it by starting to be honest with yourself about what's actually happening. What is your reality? And deciding how to lead yourself differently. Because you are in the driver's seat right now, right? Even though you may feel like you're in the passenger seat, you're actually in the driver's seat. But once burnout hits, once your body is like, no, thank you, I'm done, that being in the driver's seat and driving becomes much more challenging to do. Just think about it. I mean, even if like I used to have contacts, and if one contact was bothering me and I was trying to drive, it was so hard to drive and stay focused because you're limited in some way, right? You're not as effective when you're driving. This is very similar here, right? You're in the driver's seat. You can see things clearly right now. You can notice what are the signs of burnout? What am I experiencing? I have to pay attention to that. What am I going to do a little differently? But when burnout hits you, you're more limited in that way and things become more blurry, and you want to stay in the driver's seat. So how do we do this? Well, the first step you can take is to actually recognize and admit to yourself your own limitations. So we, as very high performing, high achieving professionals, override our own limits. I talked about this earlier. We keep going, we push through, we stay available. So the world thinks we're always available. No problem. Sure, I can do it. Saturday, 7 a.m., every single Saturday, no matter what, even though it's not an emergency, I'll do it. I'm there. Yes. When you didn't have children, maybe you that was fine for you, right? You had nothing else to do if you had no other personal things that you wanted to do. Maybe that's true. But then now you have kids and your kids are like, so it's Saturday and we have baseball and we have dance and like, I want to spend time with you, mom. And why are you on your laptop all the time? And why are you so busy working? Even my own child, my own daughter the other day was writing a writing assignment for her class about why a robot can be a friend. And I read this when I went to literacy morning at her school. And she's like, I'm gonna read you my why a robot can be a friend letter. And so she reads it and she says in it, a robot can be a friend. I'm gonna paraphrase. A robot can be a friend because sometimes when I go to my mom and I want something, she tells me that she's really busy and she's working a lot. And so sometimes a robot can be there for you when your parent cannot. So this is when I say to you that I understand, this is real time for me as well. There are times when I'm doing something on a Saturday and I tell my child, I need a few hours. Like I got to do something. I got to get something done. So it's just the reality of it. But recognizing those limitations are so important. Like recognizing that sometimes you're going to have to shift your schedule, and yeah, your kids are going to have to understand your own limitations and how available you are to them all the time, and work too, right? Just understanding that you have these limitations and that everybody has them. Even if you think someone else who it could be a peer at work, it could be a friend, even though you think that she's not wrong, Shanae, she's not wrong. She's absolutely right. Sometimes I'm busy. But that's the thing is I turned a little sideways to her. Like I kind of gave her like a look when she was reading it to me, because I was like, after all I've done to be fully present, all the intentional parenting and the conscious parenting I do, and then all you can think of are the few times where I've said I'm busy, come back. But yeah, sometimes that's what they remember, right? But the important point there is that kids notice things, and that you also can have limitations with them, just like you have limitations at work. But recognize your own just inherent limitations on what you can do physically, emotionally, mentally. Like understand there are limitations. You're not a robot, right? A robot can be a friend because a robot doesn't feel. A robot can just keep going and going and going. We're not robots, we're human. We need restoration. We need our batteries recharged, right? Robots don't need that, but we do. And so recognizing the limitation is what will help you not ignore your capacity in real time. You need to understand your capacity. And we all have limits. You need to recognize there is a limit. Now, you may think to yourself right now, of course I know there are limits. I mean, that's common sense. Yes. Sometimes what we understand intellectually and logically, we do not embody because it hasn't connected yet. You get it up here. Well, I'm saying all this to you. You're like, that makes sense. That makes sense. But then when you go to live it, you're like, wait, what? How do I do that? Yes, that's what you need to work on is the how. Is the how to live it, how to embody it, how to really believe it so that you embody it. Because you get it. There's a difference between getting it and believing it and letting your actions reflect those beliefs. I can bet you that if I looked at your calendar, you walked me through what you did for the past month, I can tell you exactly what you believe. Even if you say, no, I don't believe that. I don't believe work is the most important thing in my life. But if I looked at your calendar, I might have that conclusion because you're working 70 hours a week. And then I don't see anything you've done for yourself. I don't see anything that you've done consistently. That means 60% of the time or more. That doesn't mean 100%. With your family. You say family is number one, your kids are number one, but you haven't been home before bedtime for 10 days, for 10 work days. And this isn't about shaming. This is about recognizing, oh, that is what's happening. I don't like that. So how can I change it so that maybe I can be home for bedtime twice in 2 days, right? This isn't about massive shifts right away. You'll get there over time. But again, it's about recognizing what are my limitations? What are they and what does this mean? And then you decide intentionally, right? How do I want to do this differently? Right? It is not about what's expected. We have to address, we have our own limiting beliefs or beliefs that limit us, right? In certain ways. We have to get out of thinking we have to do what looks good to others or what looks good to those we would like to impress, especially at work. Right? We have to let go of this need to do what's always expected or what has always been expected in the past or what you've always done before, right? And it can't be, I should be able to do this because I should be able to handle this the way I used to, the way I always do. But that's not your reality anymore because the truth is you can't. You can't. It's different. You have different limitations. Right? So you want to move away from expectations, what the perception of what looks good, what you should be doing, that we have to untangle that. You have to untether from that. And then think about what actually works for me right now. What actually works for me right now? Or what do I actually want right now? How do I want to do this work life thing? Not what I used to do 10 years ago, 5 years ago, but what works for me now? What do I want and need now? And what might I need to adjust that's within the control that I have? Again, you cannot change or control your environment or other people or their behavior. Right? If you just think about that for a minute, if you were to accept I cannot control that person's behavior. I cannot control this environment. Single-handedly cannot change it. I can influence of it, but I can't single-handedly change it overnight. So then what are my options? I can accept that. Then what are my options? What's within my control that I can adjust and change for myself? This is about intentional living. Again, you may be saying to yourself, logically, that makes sense. Yeah, what could I do differently? What do I want? Try it. Try to write down today. Take 15 minutes, 10 minutes, give me 3 minutes. And write down what do you really want right now, what actually works for you right now. Try that. And just experience how confronting that can be. You're like confronting yourself in many ways because you're being honest about what it is and you're recognizing already when you write it the gap between where you are and what you want. And that's very confronting. And so it is very challenging to do. But that means that's where the work is. That's where you have to explore, right? And that's how you start to embody and not just understand intellectually and logically. And then from there, you pick the next right step, right? The next best step for you. And it becomes clear what that step is once you get real about your limitations and you've decided this is what works for me right now. This is what I need. This is what I want at this time in my life and in my career, which is different, I recognize, from what I needed or wanted before or how I operated before. Now it's a little different. I know I don't need a full overhaul. I know I can't do that. That's not sustainable, but I can start with just the next right step for me. It could be literally anything, because anything, any step you take is better than zero, is better than none, right? If you think of you on a continuum and you think of just 0 to 100, right? You take one step, you're at 1, not at 0. So you're progressing faster to 100 than if you did nothing at all, right? So one right next step could be something as simple as, maybe you decide, okay, the one thing that I feel like I do in the morning is I'm very reactive. And I feel like I need some more time to feel grounded in the morning and not so reactive and attentive to everyone else's needs, including my children. And by the way, if you have infants, this is different. So children require something different at every stage. So if you are a mom of an infant, this may be a little different for you. But if you have a little bit kids that are a little older, and don't need you at like 5 in the morning, like don't wake up crying, needing to eat at 5 in the morning, then you can try something like, and this is something that my clients have tried, so that's why I'm offering it because I know it works, is instead of having, you waking up to your phone because it feels very reactive, because once you see your phone, it's text, it's emails, it's everything that everyone requires of you, and you have not taken a moment yet to do something for yourself in the morning. So instead of having your phone next to you, under your pillow, on your nightstand, within your reach, what you can do is put your phone, if you need to be able to hear it ring for emergencies, I still need that, right? So maybe you put it in a different place in your bedroom, or maybe you put it, I've had clients put it in the living room. They're like, forget this, it's going in the living room. I've seen that as well. And it works. But someplace where you can't grab it and look at it, either if you wake up in the middle of the night or the first thing in the morning. It's to get yourself into waking up and having a moment for yourself. And when I say a moment, it could be 10 minutes. That's fine. That's better than 0, right? My clients tend to start with 5 or 10 and they get to like 20 or 30, right? So there's a progression there, depending on how early you wake up. The other thing that's related to that, because some people will say, well, I have my alarm clock on my phone. And I say, no problem. Easy solution. Go get yourself a $15 digital alarm clock like we did in the old days, okay? And get yourself an alarm clock. And by the way, there are alarm clocks that have these lovely sounds, these ambient sounds. You can do ocean, you can do spa sounds that help you go to sleep, that wake you up in the morning. Lovely. We didn't have that back then. So you can do that and have your beautiful alarm clock wake you up with the beautiful ocean sound instead of your phone going burr, burr, burr. Beautiful alarm clock. And then you take your time, do what you got to do in the morning a little bit, get centered, so you can enter your day a little bit more grounded. And I'm not even talking about meditation or breath work yet. I'm just talking about something simple, which is like having your phone away from you, you waking up, doing what you have to do, and then you going to your phone in a different mindset because you've done something tiny for yourself, which is taking time for you before you answer to the world's demands of you, because you're doing that all day. Can you give yourself 10 minutes in the morning for yourself, right? That's something like it seems very small. I'm going to tell you, people find it life-changing. Just that shift. And then it's other things like, okay, when I wake up in the morning, I'm not going to go right to my laptop at 6 in the morning. I'm going to take some time for myself. I challenged a client just yesterday, challenged a client to, when they're drinking their coffee, to not drink it with the phone next to them in the morning. Now, when I say in the morning, I'm not talking about 10 o'clock. That's the middle of your workday. I'm talking about very early in the morning, right? Try to give yourself more time for you so that you're not constantly expending energy on other things, right? Again, these tiny things are important because they lead to the big sustainable changes over time. Now, if you feel like, and there are so many other steps that you can take. It really depends on your circumstance, what would be best for you. You have to do the other analysis. So there are a lot of other steps you can take. But one thing to think about is that if you feel like you're experiencing full-on burnout, I am not a licensed medical professional. Please know that. What I have seen to be helpful and what I found to be helpful is for you to get support right away. And because this is where you can't do this alone and you shouldn't have to because there's a lot you're dealing with. So I want to say full burnout, that's one right next step. That's for you're trying to prevent burnout. That is, you're like, you see burnout creeping in, but you're not there yet. That's where this applies. But if you're in full burnout, you need to get support right away. Like, you can decide what that looks like, but you need support right away because you don't want that to get worse. Okay. The stand oh, this the standard alarm clock sound is jarring and an uncomfortable way to begin the day. Yeah, but you can do like what I said, there are alarm clocks that are very soothing. They have them on Amazon or, go to your local shop too if you don't want to do what you don't want to do is Amazon. But they have different alarm clocks now where the sound is much more pleasant. And so I don't know if I find the phone alarm clock much better than like a standard digital alarm clock that has that kind of like, that beep beep jarring sound. But that's what's important too, is that you're going to think about, is that the right thing for you? Maybe that won't be, right? Maybe you want to try something else. Maybe it's that you still do use your phone alarm, but you're very disciplined enough to shut it off and then go do what you need to do and then check the phone for your email and your text and whatever you need to do. The point is that you don't have to change everything, but you're going to make decisions based on the truth. Based on the truth. And for many people, when I say that, they're like, yeah, that's obvious. And when you do the deep work and you're looking at your truths and your reality, I've had clients say many times to me, it's really hard to accept the truth. It is hard. Because what do you do with it then? Because when you know it, you can't unknow it. And sometimes it literally requires you to do something different because you can't unknow it. You're always thinking about it. Right? So make decisions based on the truth and the reality of your situation and what you really do want. Again, one step. You're not throwing everything out all at once. You're not doing that. It's one step at a time. And it's not about what you wish you could do, what you should be able to do. It's about what is true for you, right? You don't have time for the shoulds anymore. There's no time for that. There's no energy for that anymore, right? You have to stay focused. What is real for me right now? What are my limitations? What do I have to recognize about this moment? What do I need to do differently? How am I going to decide intentionally and stay in this driver's seat? Because I don't want to be in the passenger seat of my own life. And that's what a lot of people say to me. They feel like they're in the passenger seat of their own life. So let's get you back into the driver's seat. Because you are allowed to want a meaningful, fulfilling career. You are allowed to want that and to have that. You are allowed to want and to have a very full, rich, when I say rich, I mean like emotionally rich, just alive, present life. And you are allowed to be proud of how you work, how you live, how you lead, and how you parent. You are allowed to want to be proud of that and to feel proud of that, right? But that requires, again, leading yourself a little differently, maybe than you have in the past. Shifting some things, maybe than you have in the past, because you didn't have to in the past, maybe, but you might have to now, based on what you're going through in your situation and your circumstances and what you're experiencing, right? And then just two questions that you may want to sit with later. You can screenshot this. This is going to be on replay on LinkedIn anyway, so you can grab it then. If you don't want to grab it, grab the screenshot now. But two questions that are worth, you can journal about, you can think about. I think it's a great exercise to write down your answers. and you can look them over and really take some time to be thoughtful and to do some introspection, which can be really powerful. Two questions is, when you look back in 20 years, in 30 years, what is the story that you will tell about this time in your life? What is the story you are going to tell about this time in your life? I was talking to a client recently who was remembering, thinking back on, a career of like 45 years. And they're at an inflection point right now. And looking back and saying, the things I thought were so important were just not that important as I thought they were then. And this is someone who was a senior executive, like, C-suite level. And that, and him just like coming to that realization was really powerful. And a lot of my clients do come to this realization of what actually matters. What is going to actually matter in 20, 30 years to me when I look back at this, right? What do I want to matter? And then as a parent, as a mother myself, I want to make sure that the story my children tell about me and share about me when I'm not there is a positive one. I want them to say that I was there. Okay, yeah, you can mention the times that I said go away a little bit because I'm busy, I got to do work, come back later. That's okay. You can mention those times. But was I there 80% of the time, 90% of the time? Was I present with you? Did I engage with you? Was I intentional with how I treated you? Did you feel seen by me? Did you feel like I prioritized you, like you were important to me, and I showed you that, right? I mean, I could go on forever about what's the story you want your children to share about you when you're not there. But that's something to think about, right? Like, I want my kids to know mommy wasn't there for every bedtime because she had stuff she had to do, which I'm not there for every bedtime. Like, I'm not. But I'm there most of the time. Am I there every single morning? No, because mornings are my workout mornings. So no, I'm not there a lot of the morning. But I'm there picking up after school, after school program, after school, right? Most of the time. So, and then the interactions you have with your children, what do you want them to be? Do you want them to be stressed? Do you want them to be, what do you want them to be like? And what do you want them to say about you? These are really powerful to use when you're thinking about what you want. I typically do visioning exercises with clients, which is we think about 5 years, 10, 20. And this is similar, right? Where you're thinking about what's going to matter to you when you look back at your life at that time. What's going to be most memorable? What might you regret? Right? We don't want regrets, but what might you regret? And then but you have the opportunity to change that trajectory right now because you're not there. You are here. That's 20 years away. What an opportunity. What an opportunity to direct your life and be in the driver's seat and do what it is you need to do. With that, I want to take questions with the 1 minute we have left. Any questions for me? And if you have questions or you want to talk further, you can always message me on LinkedIn. Happy to do that. Just let me know what you need. A lot of times when we do this work, even though I've explained it here, sometimes you're still wondering, I don't know where to start. I don't know how to do this. That's what I do with folks. That is the work I care so much about is in addition to leadership coaching and coaching leaders to be just more effective, more impactful. It's helping people live more meaningful lives, helping people feel fulfilled in their career and in their life. And part of that is preventing the things that get in the way of that, like burnout and feeling exhausted and feeling like you're just going through the motions. And you don't want your life to be that. You want your life to feel full and to feel like you're living it. So with that, it's 11 o'clock. I hope you have a great day, and be sure to message me if you'd like to connect and you'd like to start. doing this work.